Okay, you were saying we were sort of like discussing like the idea that that the music can maybe like work on these theoretical and kind of emotional levels.
Yeah, and because I went to school for music and studied jazz a little bit, but I was luckily, in part because of Craig there, and then early on I started some more like indie rock type of band. So this whole time I've been more in the indie circle than I guess the jazz school circle. That's never felt like my scene at all, and that's why one reason I think we hook up so well is because
we're kind of both outsiders in a weird way.
Yeah. And
I remember Chad specifically asking me after we did our record together, and he just said, "Where did you find this guy?" Like, I go, "Oh, well, he lives in Wichita." He's like, "Yeah, but like, how?" And it was sort of like, "Oh, well, because we played essentially, music that would have been conflated with indie rock in a weird way at some point many years ago, and now here we find ourselves doing something new."
Yeah, exactly. And so with my records, like anytime it gets too, I think we're both on the same page about this, but if it gets too clinical and cold and theoretical, like neither of us want that. And so even that's a goal as I write this stuff too, is I always still want it to have a sort of pop quality, not pop, but pop in like a I come listenability, and I come heavily influenced by all the Thrill Jockey stuff, Tortoise and Sea and Cake and all that stuff. That's what I listened to for so many years, and that sense of melody really informs what I'm doing. So I feel like we both would not let it get too clinical. But that's sort of not even an explicit goal. I think it just happened now that I'm kind of looking back on it. Is that I want to present some more serious concepts. And I remember when you called me to do this, thinking, okay, I'm playing with Chad Taylor and Devin Hoff. I can't go in with some indie fluff stuff, just like some pretty dreamy stuff. Like I got to try to present something here that's a little deeper, or whatever. And or at least I got to push myself a little bit more than just a dreamy little indie project or whatever. So I guess I wasn't really aware of trying to merge the more of an emotional and an intellectual thing together, but I think I
feel like that's more of my job.
Yeah, I think you really kind of helped because you sort of curated the whole thing. Even like when you invited me to do it, I was sort of like, well, what should I do? Like, do I like bring compositions in that I've already recorded, or do I how do we do this? And you kind of laid out the whole concept and how it would look, and then I kind of just went to work of writing some stuff, picking out stuff, and
that was your first time working with a producer too, right?
We don't have producers in Wichita. People don't even know what they are. Like, I think in Wichita,
maybe like a hip hop producer.
Well, yeah, but the idea of having somebody else comment on your music, everybody's so like, this is my creative vision, and
I think it's like that a lot of places.
Yeah,
I think to the music's detriment.
Yeah,
I understand that to me that kind of like goes into that like auteur theory almost of like everybody's their own Brian Wilson, everybody's like a bedroom pop genius or something, and the reality is it's like you're not. There are very few people whose music could not be improved by being surrounded with the right team.
Right.
And I know maybe terminology or a word like team scares some artists or musicians, but really that just means like a community. Like like you need a good engineer, a good producer, maybe somebody who's a good mixer, good musicians. Like art is such an interesting and difficult thing to traverse when you have a predisposition to defend yourself all the time.
Right.
And I think for me personally, I just always remember like when I heard this Alan Holdsworth record, Metal Fatigue, years and years ago when I was a teenager, I just listened to this record and I was like, oh, well, this guy did it already. I can't do that.
Right.
I don't have to think about doing that because he did it. And in a way, it freed me up to not have to worry about being like the fastest or most legato or, you know what I mean? Like, I was just kind of like, oh, I don't have to do it. Like, he did it. So what I need to do is find out who I am and what my thing is.
Right.
And then also kind of like coming to terms with the fact that I'm like not a virtuosic musician. I think that helped me in so many other facets once I was able to sort of stop defending that part of like my skill set.
Right.
You know?
That we were sort of talking about that earlier, but for me, once I kind of realized my strengths and weaknesses and realized, okay, I shouldn't be playing in a funk band, you know,
Right.
I shouldn't be trying to play like Wes Montgomery, like heavy swing jazz. And so many people try to do that. I just try to emulate that stuff, and
Right.
it's so bad. And once I kind of let go of or even feeling like I need to play bebop for that matter. You know,
Yeah.
that's the big push in music school. Everybody's got to play bebop, you know.
Well, and that makes me think, you know, we were talking at one point, and maybe I was talking with Chad about this a little too, is that your kind of like approach in some ways has a lot more to do with like Anthony Braxton than, let's say, John Coltrane. Right, where it's more of like there's a different kind of lattice work, scaffolding that is not quite as concerned with like traditional solos or traditional structure. Like this is how a jazz song is supposed to sound, right? It's almost like those things are sort of almost coincidental. It's like you can work within a concept of what jazz is, but like you kind of like, I almost feel like in a way like you nor I even really care about that. Like we're not trying to make a record that sounds quote unquote like a jazz record. We like jazz records. We like some of the ways that they sound, but you know, those records would never have like looped guitar or you know, glockenspiel or, you know what I mean, or all these multi-layered elements.
Yeah, and to me that's very disrespectful. Like I feel like the more I learned about jazz, the more I understood Lester Young and kind of got deeper into the music. I would never try to do that because it's like it's almost offensive, you know, to try to like step on these people's vocabulary and act like I could do that or try to adopt that language. To me, the best way to respect it is to try to do your own thing, even if it's way outside of what they were doing, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes I think like, especially with that early jazz, like sort of like. It's so rooted in like a kind of understanding in the history of the blues.
Right.
Whereas a lot of things nowadays, it's like you can't even. It's hard to imagine people dancing to jazz.
Yeah.
But they used to.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
I brought in Steve Hodges to play on a great record for Alex Sadnick with Jeff on guitar and Kerry Frank on organ. And one of the reasons that I was kind of adamant about having Hodges come in is that, you know, he plays for Tom Waits and Mavis Staples, and he used to play, you know, 7 nights a week, like blues, like in clubs around L.A. and Long Beach. And, you know, he comes in and just, you know, I think we did Marmaduke by Charlie Parker. And I was like thinking, man, almost any jazz drummer is going to come in here and try to just like do all their licks, you know what I mean? Do all their tricks. Hodges just comes in here and just lays it down, and it was just swinging so hard, and he's just thinking like, I'm just trying to do my best Art Blakey. And because he's thinking, oh, people dance, like people need to dance. And a lot of times when I think about, you know, there are certain things about music that it like, this maybe is a bit of an insight into my own thought process, but as a producer, and as an artist, I always am thinking about like what's wrong with something.
Right.
What can I fix? You know, maybe it's an ego trip a little bit, but it's also kind of like my job. You know, like I sort of feel like a lot of times an artist or a client comes to me and it's like they want me to fix something. They want me to help them change something that's not there or whatever. And so quite often my thought process is like it's like I used to be an investigator years and years ago, and it has an investigative aspect to it that is just part of my personality. I have to get in there and find out, like, what's wrong with this? What happened? What's missing?
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time. It's like this problem solving of like putting an ensemble together. And I remember after, listening to a few of your records and then seeing you perform, immediately, like, the idea of you and Chad was like, this is great.
Yeah.
You already like understand his vocabulary, and because of that, there's now no threshold to you guys playing music together. It's like you've been hearing him as your like dream drummer for years.
Yes.
Then I knew, like, throwing somebody like Hoff in there, it's like, oh well, this guy could he could play like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and it would be
Make you cry. Yeah.
it would be
It's
like
so good.
exquisite. You know what I mean? So in a way, like, part of my thought process in helping to kind of like put that record together for you was to say, like, who are these people who are going to add like a humanity and a vitality and a kind of like virtuosic musicianship without it ever sounding like, we got to bring like Terry Bozzio in here and have him play like an 80-piece drum kit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or, some musicians, it's just like, it's speed over, arrangement or something, you know. But I feel like the interesting thing about seeing, the progression from us doing Volume 1 to Volume 2, where we brought in Billy Moeller to play double bass, and then Jeff to play guitar with you on 2 days. It was just the second time around, it's like I got it right away.
Oh, yeah.
It almost took me like that year to kind of like suss out your vocabulary.
Maybe you kind of can feel what's coming, because you haven't heard all the final compositions yet,
Nope,
right?
not yet.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll feel adrift again or something. But there was a kind of like I just came into it with a greater understanding, and I feel like Chad did as well. Like we were both kind of like, okay, right, like you're kind of like pulling us in a funny way. We're like all pulling each other in different directions.
Yeah.
But you pulled us toward your vocabulary.
Yeah.
Which is kind of this like, it's what you hope for. You want to be a part of something where there's kind of like this tension where everybody's kind of like they're contributing something new and vital.
Yeah. And with this, what's so interesting is like my vocabulary was so influenced by Chad Taylor, and then especially Jeff Parker, who's been one of my all-time top influences since I was in high school, and so yeah, it's sort of like, so then when I bring my music to them, it kind of comes from them anyway, so I think they're sort of ready for it, because it's kind of, it's like this, I don't feel like I'm doing the same thing of them, but it's like it had influenced me so much that because I feel like Jeff got it too. I feel like
Totally.
Instantly that worked really well.
Yeah.
And listening back, I absolutely love what he played on it, and so, but it's just such a weird dynamic to bring music that has been influenced by these people and then have them play it. It's just crazy.
So I guess the other thing that, Lindsay and you and I were talking about this over lunch, but like you make a living not just as a musician but as a teacher, but you also run Air House in Wichita, which is essentially like a music school, right, and a recording studio.
Right.
So I'm curious kind of like how did you make the transition from, okay, I'm studying to be a jazz guitar player, and then you have your teacher pull the rug out from underneath you and say, do your own thing. And then eventually at some point were you inspired by him to sort of like allow other people to learn music without a kind of like, maybe a more formal environment where you kind of like hoping to to create something that you wish you could have found? Or I'm curious about that.
Actually, I hadn't thought of this for a long time, but I think the whole music school idea was his idea. Now that I think about it, I think he said, you guys should start like your own school, make your own jobs or whatever, something like that. I hadn't really put that together for a long time, but now that we're talking, but yeah, so after school, that's when I was touring. I graduated 2004, then solo got toured for a little while, and then I was teaching privately a bit too, and then our band broke up, and so I was just teaching and mostly just trying to figure out some way to make a living. And so I had a thought, well, maybe I could just like live in a place and turn the garage into a teaching room so I could teach out of there and not have to pay rent at another place, at a guitar shop, which is what I was doing, you know. But anyway, so we found this property, and real estate in Wichita is fairly affordable. That's one thing that's kept me there all this time. It's pretty easy lifestyle in a way, comparatively. So it was just a bigger spot than I had initially imagined, but converted most of the building into teaching rooms. There's 9 teaching rooms in there and a bigger rehearsal space, and then built the recording studio. But anyway, yeah, that was sort of the idea, twofold: to give teachers a really good place to teach where they can kind of run their studios and make good money, give them a good deal and recruit really good creative type teachers and that sort of thing, and then provide a service, to kind of continue on with promoting creativity and that sort of thing.
Yeah. How long is you have 2 locations? Mm-hmm. How long have they both been open?
My main location has been open for 10 years, and then the other one we've switched spots one time, but I've been out there for about 4 or 5 years.
Okay. Do you feel like you've seen in the decade that your first location's been open a change in the musical community because of the work that you kind of helped to facilitate?
I hope so. Yeah, I don't really, just kind of caught up in the day-to-day stuff, but there's
sometimes you need people on the outside to say like, okay, you're like, this is an important thing you're doing.
Yeah, I guess but yeah, there's some students of mine that were like really special students that went on to put out great albums, music I love. There's students that took like lessons there and then put together bands and recorded with us and put out albums and toured and kind of done the whole thing.
You've been able to kind of see the whole process from beginning to end.
Yeah, there's several that really stick out like that, and I'm sure we have like 25 different teachers and a lot of students that I don't even really keep track of, so I hope that's happening more than even what I'm seeing.
So I'm curious kind of I know we've talked a little bit about Volume 3.
Oh, yes.
But I'm curious, like, what the next kind of, like, phase for you and, like, the challenge that you're going to kind of set forth for yourself and maybe, your fans and listenership.
Fans? Is that thing?
Well, yeah.
No,
I think you made a lot of fans with Volume 1 already.
Well, yeah. So I have no idea.
Nobody's told you they like the record?
A few people, I suppose, but I'm just dinking around Wichita, Kansas, so I don't know what's happening. But Volume 3,
I'm just playing chords over each other,
Yeah, right.
in my spare time.
Right. I've started composition on Volume 3. Once again, I don't know how in depth you want me to go in the concepts, but I'm trying some different approaches with what I'm doing. We're going to add. I'm writing it for a flute as well and some different instruments, and so we'll work out the logistics on all that. So, which even that, I never really studied composition, so even writing for other instruments other than just, I typically just write for guitar, and then, mallets and stuff's pretty easy because I'm really just having them play melodies most of the time, not really experimenting with pushing the instrument in any way or anything like that.
But with each volume, you are like pushing it forward, right?
Yeah.
Like, the first one was mostly a trio. Mm-hmm. The second one is like mostly a quartet.
Yeah, kind of guitar duo quartet sort of thing.
And so kind of like moving into Volume 3, we're talking about flute and maybe perhaps another instrument or
Yeah,
so?
I'm going to use a lot of mallets and flute. I've been writing from, I think the kind of instrumentation will be flute, marimba, vibraphone, standard glockenspiel that I like to mess around with, and then kind of guitar, bass, drum trio.
Yeah. And we've got some, hopefully we've got some people in mind for those.
Yeah, I probably
those
can't
roles,
comme it to tape, but we have some ideas that
we should
we're
get their
hoping,
confirmation first.
hoping we'll do it.
See.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I know that we talked a little bit about this before, but I'm sort of curious, like, at a certain point, I remember you saying something to me of like the fact that like you felt like almost like going through the process with Volume 1 was like this like validation of like your own kind of like artistic pursuits in a way.
Yeah.
Right? And then almost like being able to do it like, I mean, you know, we're in Long Beach, we're not in LA, so we're not as fancy, but being able to like sort of like come out to California and then you go back to Wichita and it's sort of like, I did this record. And then now, you know, we press it on vinyl, and it's almost like you have this, like, you know, in a way it is like a monument or a totem or something, you know. And I feel like in this day and age where, you know, on Monday you could record something into GarageBand, and on Friday it could be up on Spotify.
Right.
You know, I never felt like we were precious about the production of the record at all. It was very fast, very brisk. You know, it was like 2 days of recording, a couple days of overdubs, and then we mixed it in like 3 days or something. But we did take our time, you know. We changed the album cover artwork, and you know, we wanted to make sure that it like looked great and sounded great. We went to 3 different mastering engineers, and you know, got some different things to compare. And I'm just kind of curious, like, you know, for me, I'm like busy working on records like every day by different people, and I try to do my best to like give each record the attention that it deserves, you know. And sometimes it almost feels like it just sort of like washes over me, you know. And then like a year later, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that all happened, you know. But I'm also very well aware of the fact that for you or any other individual group or artist that I work with, like that's their record. That's their main thing. You know, for me, it's not diminished in any regard, but the reality is it's like one of, you know, maybe 1 or 2 dozen that I worked on over the year.
Right.
But I'm curious for you, like how just, you'd put out records before, you put out plenty of CDs. This was the first thing under your own name. Mm-hmm. And with these musicians that you have such admiration for. And I'm just kind of curious, like, how that process was for you to almost like, because I think about this a lot. It's you know, there's that Zappa quote, and he said something like, you know, the first thing you do is start, and then the second thing you do is keep going. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it can be hard to keep going, right? You, as an artist, I think we deal with these things all the time where you put so much love and energy and effort into your work, into your craft, and then, you know, it gets 10 likes on Facebook, and you're just like, fuck it, I don't know, man. Maybe this is a waste of time.
Right.
Sometimes having all of these other people involved, just that alone is affirmation.
Yeah.
You know? Does that make sense? I don't know. I'd like to hear your kind of like feeling about that process, because I felt very heartened by just talking with you all through it. From the pre-production to the recording to the mixing, and we kept in very regular contact, you know, and I felt every time that we talked like a gratitude and a happiness and a sort of like a desire to sort of like now start to grow a little bit, you know, like, you know, it's like how a potted plant can only get like as large as the pot, you know. And I almost kind of felt like, well, you just got put into a bigger pot.
Exactly. And it's something I could not have done on my own, just being in Wichita, practicing more or whatever. Because when you asked me to do it, I I was terrified. I was so stressed out. There was several times I thought, I'm not going to do this. This is just not worth the stress, because it was like to go play with Chad Taylor. I mean, it's just so out of my comfort zone, and as a producer, I'm realizing part of being a producer is almost like a therapist too or something. It's like you really gave me the confidence, like, yeah, it's supposed to be scary. That's the point, like that's right. I want all my sessions to be like that or whatever. And so to do that, and then to have probably, I mean, you were always so supportive, but then to have Chad feel like he genuinely liked it and was like telling me like, yeah, you're onto something, keep going with this or whatever. I mean, it was just huge for me, and then to come back and do it again with then raising it up a whole other notch with like Jeff Parker there, and I don't know what he thought about it or whatever, but still like it wasn't nearly as scary the second time. And then to leave it now I feel like I just have confidence that okay, I can do my thing, and there's a place for it. There's people that like it, that are really good, and actually all these years of putting out these records sort of trying to fit into the indie scene in a way. I feel like I was always kind of catering to like a certain clientele or crowd or something, because that was what I had gotten a little bit of success with. I mean, not real success, just local, like Wichita Bubble Success, I guess. To kind of set all that aside and now enter into this almost new community where, even people have reached out to me on, social media or stuff, the people that I've listened to before, to people from Chicago or whatever that have heard the record, and it's sort of like I feel like I'm getting introduced to a community that feels much more like a much better fit for me. And so now I feel like I feel like you said, it's just kind of a start to where it's like now I can really start to work and really fully invest in like these concepts and really fully commit myself to them. So it's just been completely life-changing for me.
I think that was one of the reasons why I really wanted somebody like Bill Milkowski to write the liner notes for the record, because I felt like he had such a clear grasp of the sort of catalog of modern jazz guitar. I remember reading that Jocko biography that he wrote years and years ago, and I always loved reading Milkowski's writing because I kind of felt like in a way he was sort of like this like working man's sort of like surrogate for like all these heady musicians, He could sort of like articulate what made them interesting to somebody who wouldn't care.
Yeah.
And I felt like sort of reaching out to him and asking him to write the liner notes like almost created a kind of like this, I don't know, another little like foot in the door of like, okay, well, this guy understands like the vocabulary, and he also understands how what you're doing is different.
I think he understood it more than I do, and I read that it was like, wow, you got really deep in there, and he was right on, and it was a vantage point that I couldn't really see, I could never have described it like that, it was incredible, really.
It's been interesting to see from afar the support and enthusiasm of your community in Wichita. Through our friendship and my friendship with Lindsay and a few other folks, I feel like I've gotten a little bit of a sneak peek into that community. I was actually just doing sound for a thing the other day. And I ended up meeting this guy named Justin Carey.
I saw that. Somehow you were hooked up with him. How weird. Yeah.
We ended up working on a film audio project in LA. I had no idea, and then all of a sudden Torrin reaches out to me and is like, "Hey, is that Justin Carey?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think so. I just met him. He was the camera, op."
So weird.
But anyway, it's been really interesting for me to see because I feel like we have a lot of similarities in that I feel like we're both kind of like, man, I can't imagine, I can't believe I'm saying this word. I feel like we're both like sort of middle-aged now. Are we middle-aged? I'm 41.
37.
Okay, so
3 more years till I'm middle-aged.
Okay, sorry, I don't want to lump you in
know.
with the old timers, but I sort of feel like we both have businesses based around music, and I feel like we both feel like it's sort of like not an obligation, but sort of like a righteous duty to support art, right? And it doesn't do our community any good for us to make a bunch of money if like no one else can make a living, and it's been really interesting. One of the things that I noticed straight away when you kind of like were announcing your record and talking about your record was the sheer number of people who were sincerely proud and happy for you. And the thing is, I thought immediately, well, that only happens because you have done the same for all of those people. Like that doesn't come just out of nowhere. And I was thinking about this the other day with a guy that I know who kind of was having a hard time getting work, but when I tried to offer him work before, he's like, it's not worth my time. And I just kind of think, man, it's like, what's that old that children's nursery rhyme with like the chicken who's she's trying to bake something.